Hello and welcome to the Tell Not Show. I'm your host, Kirsha Fox, author of the Deception and Justice series. I am a homeschooling mom, gamer, and reader. My co-host, Julia J.K. Allen, can't be with us tonight, but our guest is Roger Leslie. Dr. Roger Leslie is a scholar in the fields of success and education. The winner of numerous national awards, Dr. Leslie has published books in multiple genres. A teacher, coach, and keynote speaker, Leslie entertains, inspires, and empowers people to live the life they dream and soar towards their own ideal of success. We're so excited to have him. So can you tell us a little bit about your writing journey? What got you started writing and why?
I knew from the time I was 13 that this was my dream. This is what I wanted to do. At the time, I didn't know any authors. I wasn't related to any authors, but something told me that this is how I wanted to make my contribution to the world. And what I learned about life is that as soon as I have an idea, life comes to support it.
Yes.
I was 13 years old when I had the inspiration. The very next week, my English teacher gave us a creative project to do whatever we wanted to do. And none of my teachers had ever given that assignment before. That's when I knew I could write my first story.
So how long was the story that you wrote for the teacher then?
It was about 50 pages long.
And I would love to see their faces, because I was exactly that kind of child as well, where they would say, okay, it has to be 5 pages minimum. And then they'd look directly at me and go like 15 pages maximum.
I tell you, Kirsha, it was such an exciting day for me because I left the manuscript in my book bag until the teacher called for it. And then I pulled it out and walked it up to her desk just to see the reaction on her face when she saw that block of paper. And she thought, oh my gosh, what have I got myself into now?
Yes, it is funny how soon so many of us authors know that this is within our souls. We are storytellers, like that something calls us to it. What about your publishing journey? When did you start thinking that you would publish?
So I want your viewers and listeners to know that if you are determined and steadfast, eventually it will happen. If I knew at age 13 that my first book would not be published till I was 31, I would never have continued that journey. I would have, especially so young, I would have thought, oh, this is just too daunting. I couldn't do it.
It's an eternity for a 13-year-old.
So I always thought, well, it's just, my success is just around the corner, just around the corner. And eventually, with perseverance, it happened. And it was an event that I call my fateful detour. I was teaching English. I had gotten a degree in English education, and I was an English teacher at a high school. And I've just finished a master's degree in creative writing. I'd had a few things published. I had a local history book published, but I considered that a self-published work. And at the time, this was the early 90s, self-publishing still wasn't entrepreneurial publishing. And so I didn't really feel like I'd had my big break. The week that I got my master's degree in creative writing, and I was determined never to go back to school again, the principal offered me the librarian's job, which required me to go back to school. When I went back to school, I met 2 professors. One of them got me connected to Booklist, which is the review journal of the American Library Association. She got me a part-time job there. The other professor knew that I was an aspiring writer. A publisher asked her if she would write a book on library programming. Within a few months of going back to school, I was getting published every 2 weeks, 6 or 7 times in Booklist with a byline with every one of my reviews. And I signed a 3-book contract with Libraries Unlimited to co-author those books about library programming.
That's funny how life just comes together to make it happen for you. But at the same time, you had to stay with it. You had to go on this journey, though it was a lot longer than you ever expected, for sure.
Exactly. But I encourage our listeners and viewers to watch for those convergences. It was just no coincidence that the very month that I got my master's degree was the same month that the librarian at my high school decided to retire. And for whatever reason, because I never expressed an interest in the job, my principal wanted me to take that librarian's job. all three things converged. And I thought, well, it just wasn't my lasered goal because I wanted to stay home and write. I didn't want to go back to school, but something told me, trust this detour. And it absolutely turned into what I call a fateful detour. And we all have them.
We all do, for sure. So what genres do you write, and why did you choose them?
I actually write in multiple genres,
Mm-hmm,
mostly inspirational, spirituality. I wrote books for library programming. I love movies, so I've written some movie reference books that have been published.
mm-hmm,
My latest novel is a Christmas novel. So I write whatever I feel inspired to write or whatever I'm challenged to write. I had an agent once who said, Roger, you do way too many things. I have no idea how to market you. But then I realized what she saw as a detriment was actually what made me unique in the industry. And that's what I encourage anybody who's watching to think about. What can make you unique in the industry? What can make you stand out?
mm-hmm.
Because of my varied and eclectic approach to my writing career, I'm also a writing coach. I publish other people's uh, books, and I'm an editor. Because I have firsthand experience as an author in so many different genres, I can offer my editing, coaching, and publishing clients much more than most other people can.
Absolutely, you can. All that experience counts for something. And it's great that you can turn around and hold out a hand to other people who are on the same journey and help them along as well. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
That's one reason why Julia and I started this show is like, what can we do to help other authors be seen and be heard and get more sunlight on them, right? Help them grow.
Beautiful. Exactly.
Yes, it is definitely a big question a lot of authors like struggle with of like if they want to publish in different genres, do they get a different name for all the different genres? Do they all publish under the same name? Like, will they confuse their readership? And everyone has to decide for themselves what to do with that. But I think a lot of creative people, like, we don't want to be stuck in one little box. We need to explore and do all the things. And we contain multitudes, as they say, you know.
Yes.
So,
And I think one thing that might help your viewers is
mhm,
to think about what is your mission? If
mhm,
you know a specific mission, then sometimes you can write in multiple different genres and still fulfill that same mission. For example, my mission in life is to inspire people to live the life they dream and to empower them to follow their own unique spiritual path. So, although I have books in many different genres, there's this
absolutely.
undercurrent of inspiration and empowerment, I hope, in all my books, so that even if one is a Christmas novel and the other one is a book for librarians to create great programs in their libraries, the
Mhm.
undercurrent spirit of it is that I want to inspire and empower you to live the life you dream.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I love that so much. All right. So, can you tell me a little bit about your writing process? How do you go from idea to finished draft?
I'm a big proponent of allowing the subconscious to take over. I
Hmm.
have two rules that I share with my writing clients. In the first draft, don't get it right, get it written.
Yes.
And then the next rule is in all subsequent drafts, rewriting is real writing. I
Hmm.
used to have this idea that unless I was creating something new every day, I wasn't really writing. So all those months that I would revise or get feedback from my editor and then rewrite something, I thought, well, I'm not creating anything new. I'm just revising. But the reason I was able to revise is because I got that first draft done.
Hmm.
So many aspiring writers don't get the first draft done because their right brain, which is really creative, wants to be set free to just let the ideas out. The left
Hmm.
brain is the one that will edit your manuscript. It's the one standing over like a hovering second grade teacher, watching everything you do and making you think, oh, I can't do this. I can't make a mistake. Get your conscious mind out of the way. Let your subconscious write the first draft and then go back and tweak it and revise it and rewrite it so that it is accessible to readers.
Hmm.
So generally for me, if I have an idea and inspiration, I usually start with an idea of how I want this to end, especially with my fiction. just like, well, how do I want this to end? And then I just start writing, and I let the characters figure out how they get to the top of that mountain. If I
Mhm.
map it all out and I know every step of the way, by the time I get to the writing feels flat. It's not as exciting for me. This won't make sense to people who don't write, but I love the experience of sitting down in front of the computer as if I'm sitting down opening up somebody else's book, not knowing what's going to happen next. I'll just
Mhm.
sit there and think, okay, I don't know how she's going to get herself out of this one, but let's go.
You're
And
a
I
discovery writer.
exactly.
Yes, I've heard from many people. They say that they can't outline or they can't know what's happening next because then it's boring and they don't want, like, it's like a show they've already watched. They
Yes.
want to
Yes.
discover alongside with the characters. They want to journey with them to, and they're just as surprised when things happen. It's great.
Yes. And author Joan Didion, who was just a brilliant author, I loved her works. She wrote films with her husband, and she wrote a great deal of nonfiction. Someone asked her once in an interview, well, what do you think about such and such? And she said, I don't really know what I think about something until I write about it. Once I write about it and I think it through, then I'm clear about how I think about that. Until then, it's just all vague. So sometimes we write to discover. We figure out for ourselves what's going to happen, and then we go back and revise to make it understandable for readers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, I have my own personal mantra is let it suck. I sit down, take a deep breath, and go like, just let it suck. It's okay if it's terrible. It's okay. Because I think that, yeah, you're right. We do have this person standing over our shoulder who demands perfection. And if we let them, they will keep us rewriting the same sentence over and over several different ways before we can move on. And that really impedes our flow. And, you
But
know,
we need to love that person too, because
yes.
that person really means well. They're
Yeah.
trying the hardest they can to help us make the manuscript the best they can, the
Mhm.
best we can. They just show up too soon.
Yes. It's
We
like
just need to keep reminding them,
just
I'll
soothe
need you
them,
later.
soothe that part of yourself and go and let it suck. And then
Yes.
I often tell myself that I have to get it wrong before I can get it right.
Yes.
Sometimes I write a thing and go, no, that's not right. And I write it again, like, oh, it's closer, but no, there's something wrong here. And then but I feel like we're sketching, we're putting
Yes.
sketches on a pad, like, okay, that arm isn't quite right. And you might have to do several versions, but every time you're closer and closer to the
Yes.
the final thing. So I like
Absolutely.
that a lot.
And what's exciting, Krisha, is that
Mhm,
sometimes when we write something that we think is awful, we can go back to it and find out it was much better than we thought. There are other
mhm.
times when we can write something we think, wow, I am brilliant. This was great. Then you go back to it a few weeks later. It is so overwritten and so messy. You think,
Mhm.
what in the world was I thinking?
Yes.
So we need that objectivity. We need that opportunity after we complete the first draft to get an aerial view, to kind of step back a little bit and look at it objectively. And that's when we can see, oh, what I thought was brilliant, not so much. What I thought was awful, not so bad.
It worked out. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, for you, what is the most important part of writing?
Just the creative process of thinking I'm contributing something to the world that could make a positive impact. And it is part of my legacy, because if all goes well, my writing will last a lot longer than my lifetime.
Absolutely. Yes. I've told that to my husband quite a few times where I'm like, hey, I know I'm behind on the laundry again, because I'm a mother of four, like housework and everything. Like it doesn't go away, it's always there. But I said, I'm making something more permanent than myself. After I'm done, these will still remain. And laundry's not going anywhere. But yes, I think that it's good to take that long view of knowing that you are making the world a better place in your own way. This was what you were called to do, for sure. So
And for many writers, it is a calling.
it
And
is.
so whether the financial rewards show up right away or even at all, or whether you feel like you need to balance your time with other priorities like taking care of your kids and
Mhm.
loving your spouse and doing whatever other job you might have. You have to just realize, determine what your values are. And if writing is up there near the top of your value system, then make time for it. Make sure you make time for it, because if you don't, you want to make sure you're doing it so that when you look back on your life near the end of it, you think, wow, I was faithful to my dream, as opposed to, wow, I had so many opportunities to do what I really loved and was passionate about, and I let
And
the
it didn't
laundry get in
work
the
out.
way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You got to seize that dream and make it happen, because so many people do that. They deny themselves their dreams until it's not too late, but they could have done so much more
Yes.
than what they allowed themselves to do. Yes.
And when you're on the journey, you come to realize, I believe, that the joy is the journey. It's not the destination. Because, when you get that book published, it's very exciting. I wouldn't take that away from anybody. When you win those book awards, yes, it is exciting. But those external gratifications are very fleeting. The joy is in the process. The joy is having the opportunity and seizing the opportunity to sit down and write and feel like I'm doing something that feels important to me.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I often think about my characters just sitting there waiting for me to pay attention to them again. Like if I don't write them, then they will never find out. Their story will never be told.
And in that way, we are very much like stenographers.
Mhm.
Sometimes I just sit down, not thinking, oh, I've got to come up with something, but I just sit, put my fingers on the keys, and just wait for the characters to start
Yes.
dictating their
Yes.
story. And it can be a daunting experience. I had this experience the first time when I wrote my first novel when I was 17. I was sitting cross-legged on the floor in my bedroom in with a little portable Montgomery Ward electric typewriter that my parents
Mhm.
bought me because I was an aspiring writer. And I was watching my fingers move across the keys, typing the words, and my conscious mind wasn't doing it. And I wondered if this was a form of madness. I was only 17 and I didn't understand the creative process. So I thought, am I going crazy here? Is this the end for me? But ultimately, I realized it's the subconscious doing all the really exciting work. And it's all in us already. If we just clear the path for the subconscious to come through us, the words are not coming from us, they are coming through us. And when they do, oh, the writing can be so exciting.
Oh yeah. I often call that the zone. It's just
Yes,
the most exciting place to be.
always.
All right. So, do you typically, well, I feel like you've already sort of answered this, but I'll go ahead and ask the question anyhow.
Okay.
Do you typically start with like developing your characters, or do you more focus on plot?
I think character is fiction, so characters are paramount. However, I think that the body of a work depends on the skeleton, and the skeleton of any good story is the plot. So
Mhm,
I just watch the plot develop in conjunction with, as the plot develops, the character has to make decisions to make that plot move forward. So I learn about the character as it's going, as the character is going forward with whatever conflict that he or she has. So, in answer to your question, it is a combination of plot and character working together. But the most important thing for me is to have a good story, because we want readers to be able to pick up a book, read our novel, and if they don't want to do any deeper thinking than that, they can just set it down and thought, wow, what a great story. But of
mhm,
course, we have other layers. So if we include symbolism and motifs and richer themes that make statements about society or about people or about individuals, then it can work on all those different levels. But those deeper, richer levels are the muscle. And the muscle can only stay together if it's got the bone to cling to. So you've
mhm.
got to have the skeleton of the story, a really good story, before you can add all those other elements that flesh out a story into something powerful and dynamic.
I think you're absolutely right. Yes, and so well put. To be honest, it's like all these things that you feel and know to be true, but you don't always necessarily have the words to describe it. Yeah,
Yes.
and that's what we do. Words are our thing. Do you have a favorite author, and what is something you feel they do best?
I've always been immersed in classic literature. And
Hmm.
so I've always considered The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald like the ideal novel. But of
Hmm.
course, that's not a very original response, because most of the world, I think, thinks of The Great Gatsby as one of the greatest works ever written.
I feel like people either adore it or they hate it. Like there
Yes,
doesn't
yes,
seem to be a middle ground. Like I think it inspires a lot of strong feelings, and that's what a
yes.
story is supposed to do.
What I love about the novel, among many elements, is that every single word does something powerful.
Hmm.
There isn't a wasted word. The version of it that I first read when I was in high school was only 120 pages long, which is really short for a novel. But I just kept going through it and reading it again and again, finding new nuances to the rhythm of his voice, to the narrative
Hmm.
voice, to the symbolic references to God and to color and to movement. Everything he puts in there just feels like it was just so thoroughly thought through and intentional. And I know that comes from rewriting and rewriting. As you mentioned earlier, you go
Hmm.
through it again and get a little closer and get a little closer. I love that about him. I feel similarly about some of Faulkner's works. And, William Faulkner once said something, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he
Yes.
said, if the book that I finally complete is anywhere near the thought that I had it could be when I first started, my writing career would be over. He said, the goal of the author is always to get as close to that ideal that you have in your head when you first start. And he said, the beauty of that is that we never reach it, because if we did, there would be no point to keep writing. And so that gave me such assurance. It's like, yes, many times I've read books that I've written, and even if they've done well, in sales and gotten good reviews, I can look at it 5 years later and think, oh, I could do better. I could have done better. But you've got to get that one. You got to get the earlier works out and get to the better ones.
Yes.
Some of the clients, they rewrite and rewrite and rewrite without ever trying to get it published, because they want that perfect one from the start.
Hmm.
They're not learning very much if they're just retreading the same material.
Yes, you're hitting on so many very good points because we both have met those people who have been writing for years and years and years the same one novel over and over and over again, just trying to make it absolutely perfect. And at some point, you have to know when to lift your hands away from the keyboard and go, it's good enough. It's
Yes,
good enough.
yes,
And but it's sad because so many of them never really end up publishing because it can't ever be good enough.
yes,
And yes, absolutely, you're going to go back and look at your debut novel or your earlier work and just go, oh, like I can do so much better now. But
yeah,
it's part of your journey. Many of us, we had to start as teenagers in high school writing terrible self-insert fictions and silly poetry, and we had to do that
yes,
to, we had to study and copy and practice. That
yes,
practice was important. And even though, like, again, our debut novels are just, oh, so kind of hard to look at sometimes, people still find that book and go, I loved it so much,
yes.
warts.
And there are many aspiring writers who will ask me, how do you know when you're done? How do you know
Mhm.
when you're done with the book? And my response is, when the changes you make your manuscript different, but not necessarily better, you've probably reached your level of talent at that point, and it's time to get it to publishers, get it out there, and start your next book.
Yes, get it to someone else, and yeah. Get some other eyes, get some other input, but oftentimes it's other people who will reassure you that it's good, they love it, you don't need to change anything. It's you're
Exactly.
if you're the kind of person who, like me, kind of needs permission from others sometimes, because as authors, we're sort of the ones calling the shots. It's up to us what this book is or isn't. And, you know, so having those friends who can reassure you is really nice sometimes.
Yes, yes. And so with any book,
Mhm.
for the people who are just aspiring writers or just learning about it, find an editor. Find a really good editor who can
Absolutely.
give you some objective feedback. And then after you've gotten the feedback from the editor, used it or not used it, however you want to do it, you're the author, you get to make that final choice. But when you think it's ready for publication or ready to be sent out for consideration, there are what are known as beta readers, and those are groups of people who read each other's manuscripts.
Mm-hmm.
Find some beta readers and have them read it and give you their impression. My general rule is if one person has an issue with something, I would probably take it with a grain of salt and not change it. If multiple people are having the same concern or they have the same question about something that I'm not clear about, or a motivation isn't really set up well enough, or if one section of the book seems to drag a little bit and they get bored with the lack of momentum in the plot, if multiple people give me the same feedback, that I
They're
listen
onto
to, and
something.
I get back to the drawing board and think, okay, revision time, one more time.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you definitely need to find a community. I think in media they show us authors as just working alone, and not, and for a good amount of the time we are. But you need to find your people who will read your work and give you good input, and they understand your vision, and they know enough about these books and stories that they can kind of point you in the right direction.
Yes.
And then on top of that, you have your editor or editors, your author coach, the people that empower you to keep going, for sure. You definitely need a community with this.
Yes. And what's nice about a community, Kersha, there are many things that are nice about it. But one thing, for example, early in people's writing careers, they might want to join like a writing group
Mm-hmm.
and go to the critique groups to see how
Yeah.
things go.
Mm-hmm.
One of the nicest and clearest ways that you can tell you've grown as a writer, there comes a point when you realize that you've outgrown those people in that particular critique group. That's when you know, okay, I need to find a new set of eyes to look at my manuscripts, because the kind of feedback they give is stuff I figured out on my own already, thanks in part to their feedback previously. But
Mm-hmm.
you can tell your own growth as a writer in part by being around other writers and being able to compare and say, how am I doing in relation to this person? When you go to a writers conference and you're sitting at a booth and you've got one book and nobody's coming by to see you, and the person next to you has 14 books and she's signing, and selling. There's someone whose brain you can pick. Say, what are you doing that I'm not doing? What's
Mm-hmm.
working for you that I might try as well? Sometimes the same thing will work, sometimes not. But we're learning from each other. And because they're creative artists, most writers are so generous
They
with their
are.
ideas and their time and their willingness, because they know the hardship of trying and trying and trying and taking so long to finally find success.
Yes, I have lived that scenario that you were just describing. I'm at a convention, and I am doing my very, very best to sell my 3 books, and, just freebies and stickers, and please somebody come and talk to me about books. Do you like books? And the person next to me is sitting back in her chair. Her arms are folded. She's not looking particularly friendly. And her booth is getting like just just whole mobs of people come and take my money and walk away. And at the end of the thing, she was nearly cleared out. And I didn't do terribly, I was working it, but I had to turn next to her and go like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I'm learning from her now, just how to get closer to that. Um, but what you said was so relatable. I was like, yep, I've been there.
So, just out of curiosity, can you share one bit of advice she gave you that might help us all?
She used the word teams. She says, you got to get your teams together, your straight teams, the people who are going to hype other people about your books. She says, I
Nice.
don't do all this work. She's like, get yourself a PA, get yourself, or PAs, um, pay other people to hype you.
Beautiful. That's
Either
great
your time or
advice.
your money, or just your friends who are there to hype you. But yeah, it's find your community, but
Yes.
not just the people who make you better writers, the people who help you with marketing.
Yes, exactly.
I haven't really met very many authors who like marketing. We do our
And
best, Like we
And
get
yet,
through it, but it's
yeah.
awful.
And yet here we are doing an interview because this is
And
marketing.
this is marketing.
And
Yes.
I think you make a good point because I love these interviews. So this is the kind of marketing I love to do. I have a marketing person, I have a publicist. I'm thankful that they do a lot of the stuff that I don't enjoy as much. And they help me track what's working and what's not. So I know, okay, we need to do more of this and less of this. So, yes, as an author,
Mm-hmm.
our listeners, whoever they might be, need to get to the point where they realize their time is precious. And for me, I want to spend my time writing, as much of my time just writing and doing nothing else but writing. I understand that marketing is part of it and networking is part of it, and I'm willing to do that. But for a while, when I first opened my publishing house and just started by publishing my own books, I was doing everything. I mean, I was just a one-man band. And for a short while, it was very exciting because it was all new and I was learning. There was a point at which it became exhausting. And I thought, I want to be writing. I want to be sitting at my desk, cranking out new manuscripts because my goal is to be a prolific author. In
Mm-hmm.
order to do that, you're absolutely right, or she was absolutely right. You've got to have good teams behind you. And they come, and you don't have to spend a fortune, especially if you don't have a fortune early in your career to spend on marketing and support. It doesn't necessarily have to cost a fortune. There are many companies out there that will take tens of thousands of dollars from you just to say that they'll do the marketing. And technically, they do what they say they're going to do, but that doesn't mean they get the results you're looking for.
Oh yeah, no, there are so many sharks in the water, as I like
Yes,
to tell people. You have to watch out for the sharks in the water.
yes,
And every PA is not going to be the same. They're not going to be doing the same things or hitting the same market. So you have to like comb through those and make sure you find someone who suits you the same way that
yes,
you comb through and find an editor who suits you just right. Um,
exactly.
Yes. I have definitely hired a PA in the past before and didn't have a fantastic experience with that. But I think it's important to not let yourself get burned from ever trying it again.
Yes, because you
You've learned
learn.
a lesson. You've learned a
Yeah,
lesson and you can take that learning and move on and do something better.
yes,
But yes, it's wonderful now with like the rise of social media and everything that you can do things for free. You just have to hustle, or you find those groups that are willing to promote you just because they love your writing and they want to see you do well. I think those are the most wonderful kinds of friends who want to see your success. And then
absolutely.
you in turn help them. You want to see their success.
Yes, because it's a community. It's a writer's community, and it's wonderful to belong to it.
It is. It is. How This is a fun one because you and I have touched on it a few times. How do you make time for writing?
I take the advice of Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People.
I love
One of
that.
his is keep first things first.
Mm-hmm,
And so I call them my practices. I
mm-hmm,
start my day by what I call getting in the pew, PEW. Every day I pray, I exercise, and I write.
mm-hmm.
I on my weekdays, which are my work days, I am only happy if I've started the day getting in the pew. So I pray, I exercise, and I write. Not necessarily in that order. Sometimes I wait and exercise right before lunch, but those are paramount to me. If I do that, I've had a great day. So I do what's important first. I write my own stuff first, and then I answer emails. Then I write articles. Then I do the social media. But I make sure I do what's most important first. And for me, what's most important is getting the writing done. And when I say pray, it's usually a meditation because I'm trying to clear all the clutter out of my mind and out of
Mm-hmm.
my life because I'm making room for the writing. I'm
Yes.
making a clear passage for the writing.
Yeah.
So to
Whatever you
me,
do
that's
Mm-hmm.
what's most important. And so, for people who are trying to figure out what to do, a good goal is to either set a word limit or a time limit and stick with it. In that goal, be flexible. Instead of saying, I will write 30 minutes every weekday this week, say, I will write for 2.5 hours this week because something will come up. Tuesday, your
Mm-hmm.
kid will get sick and then you can't write. And you think, oh, I didn't write 30 minutes. So do you wait and get up at midnight and try to write just because you said you wrote? No, because your writing's not going to be very good after you've had an exhausting day at the doctor with a child and now you're at midnight.
Yes.
But If you say I'll write 2 hours, 2.5 hours this week, and you miss Tuesday, well, you still have the rest of the week to make up that 30 minutes. The same thing with a word count. If you decide you want to write a certain amount, start
Mhm.
start small, but you might say, I'll write 5,000 words a week. Ideally, 1,000 words a day is very, you
It's
can get
doable.
a lot of manuscripts done very quickly if you
Mhm.
do 1,000 words a day. 5,000 words a week. That's pretty ambitious, especially if people are not used to the writing process. But do that. And then if you get through 1,500 the first day, wow, you're ahead of the game. If you get through 500, you still have 4 days left to catch up on that 500 words, but stay consistent. It is so exciting and encouraging to look at the word count in Microsoft Word and watch it grow and grow and grow. I used to literally print out the pages and put them in binders, like 3-ring binders, and I would watch the paper just get bigger and bigger and bigger. That is so encouraging to see progress, because even when you're not getting feedback, when you're not having anybody tell you you're a good writer or this is working or it's all going to be fine, just to see that word count in Microsoft Word grow, or if you do print them out, just to
Mhm.
see that stack get bigger, it's just like, wow, look what I've done already. And it just spurs you on to do more.
It does. It allows you to visually see your progress and know that you are making progress, because for sure some days at the end of the day you're like, what did I even do? You know, like,
Yes, exactly.
and it's easy to get defeated that way because you don't feel like you're doing any better than you were before. So yeah, take your wins where you can find them. I love how you talk about like getting centered for the day. I believe in his other book, Stephen R. Covey talked about like getting centered, finding the center of what's most important to you. You're taking care of your spirit, you're taking care of your body, you're taking care of your mind and your heart, all the things that actually truly matter to you. So
Yes.
yes, you're talking about like get your priorities straight for sure. And I think if you make writing a priority, yeah, it'll happen, while at the same time being flexible and giving yourself some grace for the days where it just does not work out. The cards are not in your favor. The kid is sick. I
Yes.
can't tell you how many times I've sat down at the end of the day going, yes, everyone is finally in bed. I'm going to write. And I'm just falling asleep at my keyboard. But still, the words happen.
Yes.
Yes.
And sometimes those interruptions allow for some incubation periods that
Hmm.
give you space
Hmm.
to get clearer in your mind. I know just the week before last, my dad has been sick off and on since Halloween. For the fifth time since Thanksgiving, I woke up to a message from his independent living center saying, the EMTs came, picked up your dad. He's at the hospital. So this was like 5 o'clock in the morning. So I'm
Hmm.
jumping out of bed, racing to the hospital to take care of my dad, to be with my dad, and so forth. Well, that was a day that we sat in the ER for 6 hours before they moved him to a room. I didn't get any writing done. But while I was sitting there and my dad was sleeping and I had nothing else to do, my mind was kind of
Yes.
ruminating
The
about
hamsters are on the wheels, just spinning as
yeah,
fast as they can.
exactly. And so I was just thinking about things, and I didn't necessarily come up with any really clear aha that I have to add this in. But the next time I sat down to write, things started flowing very naturally
Hmm.
because there was that incubation period where I was ruminating about things, just kind of daydreaming about the characters and the story and to see where it was going to go next. And, picking up little clues, like I'd look at all the nurses' names to see, oh, are any of these names really cool that I could use in a book? Little
Yes.
things that I do unconsciously now that help in the writing process. So I
Hmm.
wasn't necessarily sitting there jotting down notes, but my mind was in the writing process, even though I wasn't home at the computer. And although I didn't get in the pew that day,
Hmm.
I did make some progress because of being in the mode of this is it. I'm committed to these characters. I'm committed to this story, and I can't write right now, but I can think about what I'm writing and see where it takes me next.
Hmm. It's
And
a
that counts.
it's a
That
real
counts.
reward when you're a writer.
Yeah, exactly.
Just go to that place. All right. So what is your favorite part of writing?
Creating something new that didn't exist before. That
Yeah.
writing that first draft. I love
Mhm.
it.
All right. Do you have a least favorite part of writing?
I never answer least favorite questions because I have a rule that I only say positive, encouraging things.
That's a really good mindset. I will say about 95% of people answer either editing or marketing. Those
Actually,
are
I love
Mhm,
the editing process
mhm,
because I think of it as part of the writing process.
mhm,
And there are sometimes when editing a manuscript is so much easier than writing that first draft. So I like that. I tell my coaching clients that writing the first draft, I use the analogy of a jigsaw puzzle. My book, From Inspiration to Publication, is a book about writing and publishing.
mhm,
And I use an analogy, an extended metaphor of a jigsaw puzzle. And I said, writing the first draft is really just like dumping the pieces on the table and turning them all face up. That's all that writing that first draft is. The revision process is when you start interlocking those pieces to make a beautiful picture. And
mhm.
if you think about it that way, then it is a process, a multi stage process that feels much less overwhelming than thinking in the first draft, I have to get it all perfect.
Mhm. Absolutely. I actually enjoy editing quite a lot. Like it's actually starting to come together, be cohesive. It's starting to take shape, like really, and it's very encouraging for me. The that first draft can be such a slog, because like I said, I'm rewriting and rewriting and writing, trying to get it closer and closer to where it should be. So, but yes, I think that all parts of writing are really important and that your emotions or mindset about that, the way that you're framing in your mind can either make it a drag or make it, uh, I've lost my word, but you can make it awful for yourself or you can make it wonderful for yourself, just depending on how your mind frame is about it, for sure.
Yes, and in that first draft, I encourage writers to just keep writing. There are some times when I'll be writing and I can't think of the word. It's just like I know what word I want there and I can't think of it. And so I usually just either put a synonym down or just in parentheses put in capital. I put a capital W and capital C for word choice and just keep moving.
Hmm.
I guarantee if you writers out there do that, when you get back to the manuscript, even months later, your mind will go right back to that moment where you knew there was the perfect word for that spot and you'll come up with it later. Or
Yeah.
even when you walk away from the manuscript, it's kind of like, you knew what you wanted to say to somebody until you hung up. And then after you hung up, it's like, oh, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Same
Hmm.
thing happens
Hmm.
with writing. I give the same kind of encouragement when it comes to research. It's just like if I'm writing a book right now that takes place in the 50s, and in the first draft, if I wasn't sure it was an anachronism, I would
Hmm.
just put in parentheses capital A, capital N after the word so I could research it later. Don't
Hmm.
stop and research while you're writing because that ruins the momentum.
You
It's
will jump down a
extra
bunny
momentum.
hole.
Yeah, so just go ahead and just realize, okay, later you can
Mhm,
research to see, is that anachronistic? Is there a better model of car that this character could be driving that would be more fitting for her character? So
mhm,
at this point, just put whatever car you want, and then just in parentheses afterwards say, make and model, and just keep
mhm,
on moving. And then when you go back to the revision stage, that's when you can have fun and take your time. And if you do end up down a rabbit hole, it's fun because you'll be exploring, and it's not like you're delaying your writing process. You've got that first draft written. You're just
mhm.
finding the best new information to put in where before you either had the wrong information or just a generality.
Yes, I make a lot of use of like the brackets on the keyboard because they're very easy to use the search function to find again. And then I can fill
Yes.
it all in later. And I can't tell you how many times, like 5 days later, I'll just be like, oh, that word. I've thought of that word. And I wasn't even thinking about it, but like it hits you and you're like, there's that word I was looking for. It just took a while.
It's in there. You just have to let it come out on its own.
Yes, and I have so much respect for anyone who writes historical anything. Just the amount of research that goes into it, the amount of work to make sure that it is as accurate as possible. Like, oh goodness. um, would you say that you have any major influences on your writing?
I think I am most influenced by my own spiritual journey.
Mm-hmm.
The things that I face that I've gone through in my life. Three of my books are memoirs.
Okay.
And so I do a lot of reflection and introspection. And so I I think of all of our lives as a spiritual journey,
Hmm.
and because that's part of my mission, that's what I like to write about. And so I think just living life is the backdrop that I need to feed my writer's mind. And so
Hmm.
I credit just the hardships I've gone through, the challenges I've faced, the times I haven't handled things as well as I wish I would have handled them. Those are ripe opportunities to explore those issues.
Hmm.
A common rule that people get in writing is write what you know. And at one level, I agree with that. It is helpful to write what you know because you've lived it. It's true for people. But for writing to be really vivid and vivacious, I say write what you want to know. If you are having a moral struggle right now and you don't have an answer to it, then write about that. Because
Yeah.
if you already have the answer, the writing can come across as very flat and didactic. But
Hmm.
if you don't know the answer yourself just yet, but you're exploring, you
Hmm.
have the journey. And I tell writers again and again, readers don't want the message, they want the journey. They
Yes.
will get their own message by following the journey that they find in your books.
Hmm.
Give them the journey, they'll figure out their own message.
Yes. Yes. Writing can be so therapeutic that way. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times that my characters have just sort of stopped and gently turned around and are like, "Are you going through something right now that you're trying to work out here? Can you maybe ease up on us a little bit? Because this seems really." I have to stop and go, "Oh goodness," just information that people couldn't draw out of you. Your characters are now displaying, and you're like, "Oh, I gave away a little too big of a piece of myself there."
Yes.
So,
Well, but my advice to writers is in your first draft, bare your soul.
yes.
Whatever you're afraid to write about, wherever you're afraid to go there. Your best writing will show up there. Your best storyline will be there. Keep in mind that that first draft is just for you. After you write it, if you reread it and you think this is just too personal, I would never show this to anybody, not even my editor, then you can just excise it from your manuscript. You don't have to leave it in. But
Hmm.
9 times out of 10, where you're afraid to go is where the best writing will be.
Well, that's sort of where the soul of your stories come from, is you. Yes, it's very true. um, do you ever deal with writer's block?
Never. The opposite is often true. I'm usually writing so many books at one time at different stages that I feel overwhelmed trying to keep up with all of them, which is a
Hmm.
really exciting circumstance to be in.
Yes, it
I
is.
never call it a problem because I'm so grateful for it. But yeah, sometimes I just have to reorganize and restructure and reprioritize because I have so many books running through my head all at the same time,
Hmm.
and I don't have time to do them all right now. I have time to do them all if I live long enough, but right now I would need to work on one or two books at a time. So I usually stay in the process of writing one fiction book and one nonfiction book simultaneously because I
Hmm.
feel like different parts of my brain are coming up with the ideas. So I
Hmm.
very seldom feel overwhelmed. It's when I'm trying to keep up with the notes for 6 or 7 different books all at the same time that it just becomes daunting. So
It
I
gets
just
a
need
bit
to
noisy. Yeah.
Yes. So I just have to slow down and say, focus on what's most important. It's this manuscript right now.
Hmm. Hmm. I completely agree with that. I've heard from many other authors who do juggle manuscripts that way, and myself included, that when you sort of hit a wall with one, it's really easy to step off and take off with the other one because it's different, new, and refreshing, and you're excited about it. And then when you're ready, you can switch back. It allows you to shift one way or the other so that you don't lose momentum. Yeah.
Yes. And different kinds of books require different kind of energy. The
Hmm.
creative process of writing a novel requires, a lot of creating and thinking things through and planning things out. But like my movie reference books they're mostly data driven. So when I think of
Hmm.
an idea for one of my movie reference books, it's just like, oh yeah, I could talk about this actor and I could discuss what happened here. And the more we read, the better writers we are. So to me,
Yes.
rule number one is always read, read, read. Most of the time, we can read just as a reader, and the ideas will come to you, and the lessons will come through. But sometimes it's also helpful just to read as a writer. If
Mhm.
something you read really touches you, it's worth analyzing that. It's like, why was I so moved by this? What did this
Mhm.
author do so well that I was so immersed in this, that I cared, that I was so emotionally invested? The
Mhm.
opposite is true. If there's a chapter in a book that I just kind of breeze over because I'm not interested, it's just like I go back and look at it. It's like, okay, what did this author do that I don't want to do?
Mhm.
Did they belabor? Was it clear from the beginning of the chapter where they were going with this chapter? And I figured it out that, okay, just go to the end. Or was
Mhm.
it something more? Was the writing flat? Did the characters not stay as eccentric, as funny or interesting as they were? But read as a reader. Subconsciously, you'll catch it all. It'll be great. And then read as a writer,
Mhm.
and you will learn nonstop. I'm reading all the time, and I just finished a novel that I liked well enough,
Mhm.
but I thought about it afterwards, and I thought, you know, why was I not thrilled about this novel? Because the way they described it is, I should have been. It was right up my alley. It was about a sweet dog and a boy who was going to save this dog, and it's like, oh my gosh, they're going to steal my heart. And it was a good book, and it was
Mhm.
a solid storyline, a good plot, but I wasn't blown away. So
Yeah.
it's worth thinking, why didn't it do it for me? Sometimes it's the reader, but more often than not, something the writer didn't connect with me. And I think, okay, I want to learn from that person's experience and
Mhm.
do better so that my own books touch readers the way I want them to.
Mhm. Other authors make for really fantastic teachers.
They do. Absolutely.
I stop and go, wow, the way they just described that is so beautiful. Like,
Yes.
how did they do that? Yes.
Yes. Yes.
You can take inspiration from anywhere, you know. Um, yeah, it's really funny what books speak to us and touch us and that like are so solidly imprinted on your mind as that was a fantastic book.
And sometimes it can just be the tiniest detail. Like, I love the novel Memoirs of a Geisha. And
Yes.
early in the novel, he describes the tipsy house that the
Mhm.
characters live in. That one term hooked me for the rest of the book. It's like, oh my gosh, that is the perfect description of this house. And he just used the words tipsy house. And I just
Yes.
thought that was so eloquently thought through and expressed that from there on in, I loved the book, and he didn't disappoint the rest of the book. In fact, I had to keep reminding myself that it was fiction because it just felt so visceral and real that I thought, is am I reading a memoir? Then I had to go back and read, no, this is a work of fiction. This is a work of fiction.
Yes.
But he did such a beautiful job. So sometimes something little like that, like saying the tipsy house, can win readers over in a big way.
Mhm. It's so funny how even just one word can help a reader create a very perfect image in their mind of what would that look like. You know,
Yes.
we don't have to write all the details. It's you have to just give the reader enough to put it together themselves,
Yes.
and fill in the blanks with their own imagination. Yes.
Absolutely. Because readers are bringing to the reading experience their
Mm.
own life history.
Yes.
So, when I was a teacher, I used to draw two figures on the board. One was a book, one was a human, and I said, "Where does literature exist?" And at first, all the kids would say, "In the book, in the book." And then we talk a little while, and they'd say, "Oh no, in the mind of the reader." And then ultimately, we concluded, "Oh, it's in that space between the two. It's where we meet the author and those words that determine where literature really lies."
Mhm. Oh, goodness. I find myself wishing I could have been a student because what a way to engage with students where you challenge them, present a puzzle and make them figure it out for themselves. And then, oh, no, trick, it's in the middle between the two, both of them. I loved it. It sounds like you're in a very effective teacher just in the short time I've been speaking with you.
Thank you so much. Well, my next book, which comes out later this year, is called Being Mr. Leslie: What I Learned from My Students About Teaching and Life. And so I returned, even though I was in the classroom in the 80s and 90s, I
Hmm.
went back and wrote essays about 52 of my students and what they taught me and what impact they had on my life. So, yes, those were life changing experiences for me that I would never trade. and they've informed my writing so much these last 30 years.
I wonder what happened with these 52 students that like made them stand out to the point where you would include them in their book, because you must have been teaching for at least a few decades, as you mentioned. So
I was a teacher for 11 years and a librarian
okay.
for 14. Yes. So yeah, the one of the biggest challenges, how do I pick
Mhm.
52 students out of all the, because I literally taught hundreds and hundreds of students over
Yes.
those 11 years. Well over 1,000 actually.
Mhm.
And so it was, again, once you know your theme, you've got the core of what you need. And what I wanted were those pivotal moments where I was changed as a human being because of my interaction with a particular student or even with an entire class.
Yes.
And one fun part of this book was, after I wrote the book, I sought out all of those students to show them the essay that I wrote about them and get their approval, and then find out where are they now, because I was curious. I knew some because I'm still
Mhm.
connected with some on social media, but there are many that I didn't know whatever happened to. So at the end of the book, there's, where are they now? And there's a description of all of them about what they've done since high school, and
Mhm.
what careers they chose, what their personal life is like. And it's just been so
What is that?
heartwarming to reconnect with these students that I have not seen in 30 some years.
That is a lot of years to
Yes.
get a snapshot then and now, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes people come into your lives and you sort of recognize them. You're like, oh, there you are. You're
Yes.
here to teach me something.
Yes. And
You're here to
what's funny,
challenge me.
Kirsha?
Yes.
Is that some students' personalities are very similar to what they were all those decades ago. There are some that I send out. We're including photos of these
Mhm.
students, because we run photos. There were a few students who never quite got their assignments in on time in high school. I sent them emails asking them to send me pictures. Guess who are the ones we had to email 3 or 4 times because they didn't quite get the pictures to us on time? Same
No.
students.
Yeah. Yeah, some things are baked in. All right. What would you say has been your most significant writing victory so far? And it sounds like you have many, so it might be hard to choose, but you also sound like someone who very much knows already.
So my book, My First Last Year, came
Mhm.
about as a result of a dream. One night I had a dream where I was told to live the next 365 days as if I would never experience those days again. I wasn't
Mhm.
told for sure that I was going to die, but I was told to put everything into my life in that 1 year. And then while I was living it, write about it, create a book about it. And then after the book came out, to teach classes about it and help other people live the life they dream.
Mhm.
That publication, and that was the first publication from my own publishing house. Before then, I had been published by some large publishing houses and some small and medium presses, but I wanted to
Mhm.
start my own publishing house. So the book was My First Last Year, because I didn't want to tell the universe I wanted this to be my last year. So I
Mhm.
called it, this is just my first last year.
Yes. It's
Yes.
very,
And
very
so,
important what you put out to the universe, because it will
yes.
absolutely give it to you.
And so I'm proud of many of my books. I have 20 books, published works right now. And there are many that I'm proud of for different reasons. But that one is so personal. And I just felt like there was a divine message in that dream that told me to do that. And I'm so grateful that I had the dream and that I had the opportunity, because so many life changing occurrences happened that year. And so since then, I've been, sharing the book and intermittently teaching what I call fly classes. Here's how that came about. Sometimes I wasn't at home when I had to write about what
Mhm.
was happening. And so I kept writing First Last Year. I kept calling it My First Last Year. And I thought, it got kind of cumbersome. So I abbreviated First Last Year to FLY. And I
Mhm.
thought, oh my gosh, I've got my metaphor. So now I teach people to fly.
Yes. That's so clever.
I can't take credit for it. The inspiration just struck me.
Yes. You're just channeling this. Yeah.
Yeah, it came through me, not from me.
Mhm. All right. Well, if you'd like to take a few minutes, if you want to show covers of your books or talk about them, tell our listeners how they can find you on social media, or where can they learn more about you and your books? This is your time.
Sure. Well, my name is Roger Leslie. So my website is rogerleslie.com. And you could just look up Roger Leslie or author Roger Leslie on any of the social media. There's the cover of my first last year.
Mm-hmm.
And that one came out in 2015 and it's still doing well. My latest memoir came out in 2023, and it's called Light Come Out of the Closet. And it is my story of coming to terms with my spirituality and my sexuality. I knew from the time that I was a toddler that something was different, and I knew I was gay pretty early on. I had to reconcile that with what I learned from my family, my religion, and my society, because they were giving me a message that told me I was not worthy to be loved and I could not love, and I didn't want to live if I couldn't have love in my life. And the most recent book is No Stranger Christmas. And it is a Christmas novel that came out just this past year.
And it carries a lot of those same themes, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. It's about a young boy coming to terms with his own, as much about his sexuality as his understanding of what art is and how art can heal. He wants to be a filmmaker. He wants to be a producer, and he gets the opportunity to star in a Christmas nativity, a live nativity, but he wants to add dialogue and he wants to direct it. And so it turns out that this very eccentric artist is brought into the school to help jazz up the production. And thanks to her, he learns how art can help us figure out who we are and gives us the avenue through which we can give our gifts to the world. Those are the three most recent ones.
Yes.
Or wonderful. Three of the recent ones. Yes.
And then are you active on social media that like an author presence?
Yes, I am. You can either look me up as Roger Leslie or author Roger Leslie on Facebook, on Instagram. Those are the two main venues that I use. And I usually share articles I've written or interviews that I've done. I'll be posting this one on my social media connections. So, people can watch for this in addition to where they'll find you normally. Once you send me the link, I'll share that on social media, and Absolutely. We'll just let the world know what we're doing.
Yes, otherwise they won't know. All right. Well, thank you again. I know we had a few misses. I'm really glad we were able to finally meet at last.
This is great. You've been a joy, for sure. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our listeners at home, and join us next week to be on our show. Find us on social media at The Tell Not Show, or email us at thetellnotshow@gmail.com. And remember, there's always more than one way up a mountain. Thanks.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider subscribing and liking. We appreciate all the support. Julia J.K. Allen is an author, editor, and coach, and can be found at hijinksrudder.com.
Kirsha Fox is an author, avid reader, gamer, and mother to four, and you can find her at kirshafox.com. Thanks, and see you next time.